shortages boost growth outlooks for the nation's economy. After Spain made the latest diplomatic response to Washington's spy agency scandal, the White House says it will review and possibly tone down its surveillance activities. Primetime News begins now. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening news. It's 29th here in Seoul. I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening with some good news on the economic front.
Korea's trade balance stayed in the black for the 20th month in a row last month, while economists revised up their forecast for the Korean economy. Arirang News' economics correspondent Hwang Ji-hye has more.
The Bank of Korea set Tuesday plus in September. Goods and services stood at over $6.5 billion, up by nearly $1 billion from the previous month. This is the 20th straight month for Korea to post a current account surplus, reflecting reduced working days for September when factories were closed for several marked Chuseok's Thanksgiving holidays. Exports of goods fell 2.7% from a year earlier to $46 billion, while imports dropped 3.5% to $40 billion. The service account, which includes tourism and shipping, also totaled to a surplus of around $870 million in September, following a surplus of $100 million in the previous month. With signs that both exports and domestic spending will improve in coming months, local and foreign brokerage houses are raising their projections for the Korean economy for this year and next year. Japanese firm Nomura has revised up its 2013 growth outlook for Korea to 2.9% from its earlier forecast of 2%. Its 4% growth projection for next year, the most optimistic forecast among major brokerage houses. Samsung Securities has also raised its growth outlook by 0.4 percentage points for this year and by 0.3 percentage points for next year. By brokerage houses came after the bank of that the nation's gross domestic product rose 3.3% in the third quarter of this year from a year earlier, the fastest pace of expansion in nearly 2 years. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
The government's debt relief program, introduced earlier this year, is doing its part to assist in need.
By the year's end, 600,000 individuals are personal debt crunches. The program, dubbed the National Happiness Fund. Our Kim Young-gil reports.
President Park Geun-hye's National Debt Relief Program, the National Happiness Fund, is aimed at helping low-income debtors handle their loan repayments. The fund helps households behind on their debts to write off up to 6% of their debt, pay back the rest over a period of 10 years. So far, around 210,000 people have applied for the program, and at this rate, officials expect the total number of beneficiaries to top 600,000 by the end of the year. The Financial Services Commission says that as of October, around 190,000 delinquent borrowers have benefited from the fund. And official individuals can't apply for debt relief programs directly to the government from next month. The fund will continue the programs through financial institutions for the next 5 years. However, some say that while the debt relief program is a helpful way to help low-income people get out, people may stunned as a government people who try to limit their means. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Korea has been ranked one of the top places to do business in the world. It has advanced by one notch to 7th in the global ranking in terms of business environment.
The Finance Ministry said Tuesday that Korea has kept its place in the top 10 out of 180 countries on the World Bank's business ranking for the third straight year. The ministry went on to say that the improved business conditions came from the government's efforts to streamline regulations for business operation. Singapore led the annual competitiveness scorecard, followed by Hong Kong, New Zealand, and the United States. Now, today marks the 20th anniversary of Savings Day, which celebrates the act of financial planning, debt reduction, and wealth accumulation.
While the tendency to be thrifty has played a huge part in transforming Korea into one of the most advanced economies in the world, the rate at which Koreans tuck their money away has tumbled in recent years. Our Yu Lian explains.
Members of the Women's Association have taken to the street, calling on everyone to get a savings bank book.
This is a scene from a savings campaign in Seoul some 40 years ago. Fast forward a few decades to this Tuesday, the 50th anniversary of Savings Day, which was first designated back in 1964. The nationwide movement played a big role in transforming a nation of its economy, with the nation's household savings rate rising from 5% in 1964 to over 24% by 1988. But as of last year, the figure has slumped to 3.4%. Out of the 25 OECD member states, Korea ranked in the bottom tier at 18th place as of 2011. So why are less Koreans saving? Well, for some, living expenses.
There's nothing to save. The education costs for my children and the price of goods are all too high. How can we save?
A drop in interest rates, especially since the Asian financial crisis, has also played a role.
The problem with low interest rates is that it induces people to create more debt. People spend by creating debt rather than through.
This is an easier time. Their rate of savings has reached nearly 20%.
Ever since the global financial crisis, households' real wages have remained stagnant, while businesses' income has been rapidly increasing.
And while that may be good news for businesses and the Korean economy looking forward, the uphill climb to save is for ordinary citizens. Given the rapidly aging population, experts also warn the low savings rate could place a heavy burden on retirees in the years to come. Yurian, Arirang News.
Are we close to seeing a war between Asia's two superpowers, all because of the tiny islands? We turn now for an expert's take on this question and look into the possibility of future military skirmishes in the region.
We are joined by Dr. Kim Tae-han, Professor of International Studies at Chungang University in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Professor, how likely is that we will see a war between?
Well, you just mentioned the regional war, but if you are saying a war between China and Japan, it's not just a regional war. I would say it's almost like a world war, because those two are two of the most largest economies in the world and heavily militarized already. Well, if you have that war in your mind, I would say that is a very, the war is so interdependent, so many things at stake that they cannot go simply into military conflict with the potential for full-scale war. But if you mean a kind of war-like tensions and exchange of wars and small-scale military clashes, I would say it may be likely, more likely than not. So I'm pretty possibility, yes.
Do these tensions affect the situation in the region if it's not going to, turn out into a full-scale global war? What should we still be concerned about?
If you think of East Asia as a region, China and Japan are two outstanding countries. I would compare them to an elephant. So in our case, an elephant fight, there's aggressors that get trampled. I would see that similar situations. If military tension is likely, the trade exchanges will be affected, and then the financial market will get panicked first before that. So that. Then with other issues, like, Japan and China has other countries with territorial issues, and that will all work together. So the situation here very bad, very bad.
Well, Japan has been showing signs of military expansion backed by U.S. support. Should we be concerned of Tokyo's more of a move to become more of an assertive role in Asia? And will Washington be able to tame them if their military ambition spirals out of control?
Well, Washington is hinting that they will support Japanese remilitarization, or at least more active roles in military aspects, on the presumption that they can control or tame Japanese if it goes out of control. but they are, I think, short-sighted and narrow-minded. I mean, when you do not have power, yes, you will get tamed. But when you have power, you are not get tamed. That is one short-sighted. Imagine is that Article 9, which prohibits armament, militarization of Japanese government, is not just a simple, isolated issue. It reflects the status quo, center of the status quo, which reflects the war, post-war settlement after the Second World War. Second World War was a world war, hegemony war, and Japan was defeated. As a result of that, Japan got that kind of article in that constitution. And the United States was not alone in that war. Russia was involved in terms of Soviet Union, China was involved, and let's say Britain and France were involved. Those 5 countries are permanent members of the Security Council that reflect that they were victors from Second World War. So United States alone cannot approach that. It should approach that as from the historical perspective and global perspective.
So against this backdrop, how should Korea prepare?
Well, President Park Geun-hye once mentioned what is called Asia paradox. She was saying that Asia economy is interdependent and booming. And Asia has so many issues, security-wise, North Korean nuclear issues, those territorial issues we are watching, and still we lack any kind of multilateral cooperation forum to resolve, to handle those issues. So she was proposing a kind of multilateral forum, region-wide forum, to address those dangerous, potential security issues. And even before it gets started, these dangerous territorial issues already popped up. So, South Korea, once she had that kind of policy initiative in mind, should take more active roles in addressing those issues, because it is so many things at stake.
Professor Kim, thank you very much and for your insight.
Thank you.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
Legislative stances that
only Korea's global news can provide.
The United States latest report less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on the news are trying to cover up the South Korea.
South Korea, China, and the United States are stepping up efforts to bring about a diplomatic solution to the North Korean nuclear issue. China's top nuclear envoy is in Washington to discuss with his U.S. counterpart. The South Korean representative is scheduled to meet with the two sides separately next month. Our Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
China's top nuclear envoy Woo Da-wei began a 2-day meeting with his U.S. counterpart Glenn Davies in Washington on Monday, stirring up speculation about a possible resumption of the 6-party talks. Department spokesman said that Woo had active discussions on issues related to North Korea with a number of senior diplomats in Washington. She added that the U.S. and China see eye to eye on the fundamental importance of denuclearizing the North, and explained that Woo's visit is part of bilateral efforts to find a peaceful solution to the problem. The Chinese, the first since April, represents Beijing's active efforts for reviving the long-stalled 6-party talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia. Woo may try to persuade officials in Washington by referring to Pyongyang's change in attitude in his meeting with his partner Kim Kye-kwan in Beijing last month. And with South Korea's top nuclear negotiator Cho Tae-yong expected to visit Washington early next month, Seoul's foreign ministry expressed hopes for solid progress to be made on denuclearizing the North.
China's special representative for Korean Peninsula Affairs, Woo Da-wei, is visiting the United States, and Korea's special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, Yong, is also planning it there. We are expecting this to be an opportunity for close consultation.
While some experts are hopeful that the latest round of diplomacy will speed up moves for resuming the multilateral dialogue, the U.S. reiterated that the North must give up its nuclear program before returning to talks, adding that the ball lies in North Korea's court. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang.
The north, the regime appears to be in the process of upgrading its missile launch site, from which it fired a long-range rocket last December, possibly to cater to larger rockets. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun has more on the daunting signs.
Is North Korea trying to fire larger rockets and newer mobile missiles? Recent satellite imagery shows the exclusive regime is undertaking a major construction project at its Dongchangni launch site, its main missile launch site located on the northwestern coast, possibly to accommodate larger rockets. The U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies says that based on its analysis of the satellite imagery, it spotted another pad in addition to its first identified. While the launch tower from which Pyongyang fired off its long-range Unha-3 rocket last December is being upgraded. New roads and bridges are also being built that connect the new launch pad to the launch tower. Pointing out that the new roads appear much wider and sturdier than existing ones, the institute suggests that the roads may be used to support vehicles, such as transporter erector launchers for mobile missiles. The institute predicts the North will complete the construction project by the middle of next year. But it also warns that the communist state could be ready to launch additional rockets at any given time, as construction on the new launch pad has the potential to be completed very soon. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
And while the controversy continues over Washington's spying program on foreign leaders, the White House has admitted for the first time that new constraints may be needed on the way the U.S. gathers and uses intelligence. The acknowledgement came after Spain became the latest country to protest U.S. spying on its citizens. Reports.
The White House said Monday that it will review its surveillance activities and consider toning down their scope, but emphasized that intelligence gathering played a crucial role in identifying and breaking up terrorist plots.
These capabilities are part of the reason we've been able to foil numerous terrorist plots, adapt to a post-9/11 security environment. At the same time, with new capabilities, we recognize that there need to be additional constraints on how we gather and use intelligence.
The Obama administration is coming under intense fire over allegations the U.S. National Security Agency tapped into German Chancellor Angela Merkel's mobile phone, as well as the phone calls, texts, and emails of hundreds of millions of people in Spain.
We understand has caused concern in countries that represent some of our closest relationships internationally, and we are working to allay those concerns and to discuss these issues.
The admission came as Spain became the latest country to summon the U.S. ambassador to discuss the alleged spying on its citizens. Spanish newspaper El reported earlier this week that over 60 million phone calls made in Spain had been intercepted by the NSA between December 10, 2012 and January 8 this year. The Italian Daily also reported Monday that the NSA has spied on over 46 million of its citizens' phone calls and communications over a period. A move, the mulling plans to summon former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, who is currently under asylum in Russia, as a witness if allegations of the NSA spying on Angela Merkel goes to court. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The pervasive nature of technology knows no bounds in modern society. It's changed the way we live, and it's also changing the way doctors and patients interact. Park Ji-won reports on plans to introduce something called telemedicine consultations here in the nation as early as 2015.
The Ministry of Health and Welfare announced plans on Tuesday to revise current medical laws to allow for telemedicine services in Korea. As it stands now, interactive video conferencing and remote consultations are options for doctors, but the change would represent the first time that the telemedicine programs will be available between patients and doctors. The telemedicine consultation programs in Korea would first start with remote healthcare monitorings, enabling medical professionals to consult with patients at a distance through computers. The teleconsultations, however, will be limited to low medical risk patients, such as those who suffer from high blood pressure or diabetes. It will also be limited to patients who already have medical records with doctors. those who live in rural areas where access to medical professionals is limited will be given priority in the telemedicine. Examination Ministry says the revised legislation on telemedicine services will be submitted to the National Assembly at the end of this year, and the law will come into force as early as 2015. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The Tusan Bears and the Samsung Lions met for Game 5 of the Korean series.
And the Bears were a win away from being crowned champions. Stephen Che joins us for the details of the game. Stephen.
Hey guys, Game 5 of the baseball finals was full of scoring, so let's get straight to the highlights. It's the first inning. The Lions, Che Tae-in, solo homer to here. It's going to left field. 2 runs come in later. It's 3-0 Samsung. Now bottom second, the Bears, Che Jun-suk. He hits a solo shot. Samsung still up 3-1. Now top third, Samsung's Che Hyung-woo. He leaves his mark as well with a home. It's 4-1 Lions. At the bottom, Che Jun-suk hits one home, 2-run double. 4 we go on to the 5th. Park Seok-min hits one home for Samsung, but Tusan's Che Jun-suk once again ties it up with this home run. It's 5-5. Scores are level. Now Samsung in the 8th. They break the deadlock. Park Han-hee, he hits 2 home, and it's still going on. Now it's 7-5. Bottom of the 9th inning. Now to Major League Baseball, the Boston Red Sox have shown why they have the best record in baseball. They know how to win on the road, and that's exactly what they did in Game 5 of the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. On the back of ace John Lester, who pitched another gem, Boston came away with the 3-1 win, taking 2 of 3 at Busch Stadium. The Red Sox, 2 in the series. 6 heads back on Wednesday. Let's come back home and check out Tuesday's top KBL matchup. The Mobis Phoebus took a road trip to Changwon to take on the LG Sakers. Mobis trying to rebound from 3 straight losses. The Sakers looking to extend their hot streak to 5. First half, LG keeps the pace up, running the floor, and take a 43-34 lead into the 3rd. Now it's the 3rd. LG's defense starts to break down, and in the 4th, it's all about Mobis's big man, Rod Benson. He ends with a game-high 29 points to go with his 13 boards, and Mobis beats LG 79-72. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
A hurricane-force storm battered northern Europe on Monday.
It was the worst storm to hit the region in a decade. And for details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, fill us in.
Hello, Sean and Chi-het. The storm left at least 13 dead in Europe, and most of the victims were crushed by falling trees as a result of record gusts of 200 kilometers per hour. And out of the many countries, England was the most affected by the storm, with at least 270,000 left without power and 130 flights canceled. Now, moving on to Korea's weather, the central regions will gradually escape from the low pressure system, which is why it has stopped raining in some areas. The showers will gradually come to an end later tonight, and after today's drizzles, tomorrow looks to be a sunny autumn day here in Korea. Keep in mind that there may be about twice as much as fine dust than usual in the central and west coast regions from China. Nevertheless, the dusty air will disappear early tomorrow morning. Taking a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, sunny Seoul reaches 6 degrees in the morning with a high of 15. Meanwhile, Daegu and Gwangju should hit 18. Moving on, Daejeon and Dokdo should top out at 16 degrees, all the while Mount Kumgang peaks at 8. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Tuesday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Hi, my name is Alina. People are so busy these days. Can modern people live without their smartphones, mobile phones, and earphones? As a city dweller, I always yearn to travel. Here is how I envision my dream of traveling. Gangneung is an amazing city. A place where time stands still. I used to think that visiting this place would be just a wild dream. Peace and quiet away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Breathing alone with the trees and falling asleep under the stars. Here I started to dream once again. How can water taste so good?